My daughter-in-law didn't show up at my son's funeral. Hours later, she posted a picture drinking in Cancun with the gardener. The caption said, "Enjoy life while you can." That was when I received a message from my son and froze. "Dad, come to my house now." But my son had been dead for 3 days. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up for the truth even when your voice was shaking. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I am 72 years old, and I have spent my entire life dealing with load-bearing structures. As a structural engineer, I know exactly how much weight a steel beam can take before it snaps. I know that concrete is strong under compression, but weak under tension. But standing there, in the freezing rain, at Oakwood Cemetery, watching the mahogany casket of my only son, Lucas, being lowered into the wet mud, I realized I knew nothing about the breaking point of a human heart. The rain in Seattle does not wash things away. It just makes the mud heavier. It makes the black umbrellas of the mourners look like a flock of vultures waiting for a feast. I stood at the edge of the grave, my hands clasped behind my back. Not because I was calm, but because I was afraid that if I let go, I would fall apart. I was wearing the black suit Lucas had bought me for his wedding 5 years ago. It felt tight across the shoulders now, or maybe the weight of the world was just pressing down harder today. To my left stood Sterling, my attorney, and my oldest friend. He held an umbrella over my head, but I could feel the dampness seeping into my bones. To my right was an empty folding chair. It was the chair reserved for the widow. The velvet cushion was getting soaked by the rain, turning a dark, soggy gray. That empty chair screamed louder than any wail of grief ever could. It was a void, a black hole in the middle of the ceremony that sucked all the dignity out of the moment. I could hear them whispering. The business partners, the investors from Lucas's cybersecurity firm. They thought the sound of the rain and the priest's drone covered their voices. But I have spent 40 years on construction sites listening for the crack of a bolt over the roar of jackhammers. My hearing is just fine. "Where is she?" one of them whispered. A man in a blue suit, who I think was Lucas's CFO. "Maybe she is too grief-stricken to come," the woman next to him replied, though her tone dripped with sarcasm. "Grief-stricken, my ass," the man scoffed. "She is probably meeting with the lawyers." Lucas left behind a $10 million life insurance policy and the patent for the new data encryption chip. That crying widow act only lasts until the check clears. I tightened my grip on my own wrist behind my back. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to turn around and shout at them. I wanted to tell them to show some respect for the man who had built their fortunes. Lucas was a genius. He was not like me. I built bridges with steel and sweat. He built invisible fortresses with code and logic. He was soft where I was hard. He was trusting where I was skeptical. And right now, his final exit was being turned into a gossip session because his wife could not be bothered to show up. The priest threw the first handful of dirt onto the casket. The sound was a dull, hollow thud. It sounded like a door closing forever. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet pine and lilies. I looked around the crowd, searching for a reason. Any reason. Finally, my eyes landed on Mrs. Gable, Monica's mother. She was standing near the back, huddled under a large umbrella, trying to make herself invisible. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though the sky was the color of a bruised plum. As the service ended and people began to drift away toward their cars, muttering generic condolences to me, I walked straight toward her. My boots sank into the soft grass. I moved with the purpose of a foreman walking toward a safety violation. Mrs. Gable saw me coming. She flinched. I saw it. A tiny involuntary jerk of her shoulders. She tried to smile, but her lips were trembling. "Harrison," she said, her voice high and thin. "I am so sorry. This is a tragedy. A complete tragedy." "Where is she?" I asked. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. My voice is like grinding gravel. It carries. She is devastated, Harrison. Just devastated, Mrs. Gable stammered, clutching her purse like a shield. She collapsed this morning. She could not even get out of bed. We had to take her to a private clinic downtown. The doctors sedated her. She wanted to be here so badly, but her heart, she just could not handle the stress. I looked at this woman. I looked at the way her eyes darted to the left, avoiding mine. I looked at the way her fingers tapped nervously on the clasp of her expensive leather bag. A bag my son probably paid for. Which clinic, I asked. I will go visit her after this. No, she said too quickly. No visitors. The doctors said she needs absolute isolation, complete rest. She will call you when she wakes up. Please, Harrison, do not cause a scene. She loved Lucas so much. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I really wanted to believe her. Because the alternative was that my son had died loving a monster. The alternative was that the woman he worshipped, the woman he defended every time I called her selfish, was spitting on his memory. So I nodded. I chose the lie. It was a structural weakness in my judgment, but I chose it to keep from collapsing right there in the graveyard. I understand, I said quietly. Tell her I hope she recovers. I turned away and walked back to my truck. It was an old Ford F-150. Lucas used to beg me to trade it in for something modern, with heated seats and sensors, but I liked the simplicity of it. I liked things I could fix with a wrench. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, shutting out the rain. The silence in the cab was deafening. I looked at the passenger seat. There was a small plastic dinosaur there, a toy my grandson Leo had left the last time they visited. Leo. Where was he? Mrs. Gable hadn't mentioned him. Was he at the clinic too? A sudden wave of exhaustion hit me. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. I was 72 years old. I was alone. My wife had passed 10 years ago, and now my boy was gone. I felt like an old building that had outlasted its purpose, waiting for the wrecking ball. My phone buzzed in my breast pocket. I ignored it. Probably another condolence text from someone who didn't know what to say. It buzzed again, and again, a rapid staccato vibration against my chest. I sighed and pulled it out. My fingers were stiff from the cold. I wiped a drop of rain off the screen. It was an Instagram notification. Lucas had installed the app on my phone years ago so I could see pictures of Leo. I never knew how to use it properly, but the notifications always popped up. User Monica Caldwell just added to their story. My thumb hovered over the screen. Mrs. Gable said she was sedated. She said she was in a private clinic. I tapped the notification. The screen brightened. It wasn't a hospital room. It was blue. Bright, piercing turquoise blue. The ocean. The image loaded fully. It was a selfie. Monica was wearing a white bikini that barely covered anything. She was holding a large glass with a salted rim, and leaning in next to her, his chest bare and glistening with oil, was Jax. The 25-year-old personal trainer and gardener Lucas had hired last summer. The man I had warned Lucas about because he looked at Monica with hungry eyes. They were smiling. Not just smiling. They were laughing. Monica's head was thrown back, her mouth open in a roar of delight. I stared at the timestamp. 2 minutes ago. I stared at the location tag, the Ritz-Carlton, Cancun, and then I read the caption written in bold white letters across the bottom of the photo. Enjoy life while you can. Freedom tastes like tequila. The air left my lungs. It felt like I had been punched in the gut by a sledgehammer. The lie didn't just crack, it shattered. She wasn't sick. She wasn't grieving. She was celebrating. My son was being covered with 6 feet of dirt, and his wife was on a honeymoon with the help. My hand started to shake. A rage so hot and pure boiled up inside me that my vision actually blurred. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I wanted to drive to the airport. I wanted to fly down there and drag her out of that hotel by her hair. But then the phone buzzed again. Not a social media notification this time. A text message. I looked at the sender ID, and my heart stopped beating. Lucas. I blinked. I wiped my eyes, thinking the tears were playing tricks on me, but the name remained. Lucas. I opened the message. Dad, help me. Come to the house now. Do not let her know. Enter code Omega. I stared at the words. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the floor mats. I sat there frozen while the rain hammered against the roof of the truck like 1,000 accusing fingers. Lucas was dead. I had identified the body. I had seen the charred remains from the car crash. So who was texting me? Was this a cruel prank? Was Monica trying to drive me insane before she took my money? Or was there something else? Something buried deeper than my son? I reached down and picked up the phone. I looked at the message one more time. Code Omega. I knew that code. It was the emergency override for his home security system. A code he said only he and I knew. I put the truck in gear. The tires spun in the mud before gripping the pavement. I didn't know what I was driving into. A trap, a ghost story, or a war. But as I merged onto the highway leaving the graveyard behind, I knew one thing. The grieving father was gone. The engineer was back. And I was about to find out where the structural failure really was. The blue light of the screen seared my eyes, burning a hole through the gray gloom of the cemetery. The contrast was physically painful, a sharp slap of vibrant color in a world of mud and black umbrellas. There was my daughter-in-law, Monica, pixelated, but unmistakably joyous, her head thrown back in laughter, the white sand of Cancun dusting her skin. And there was Jax, the 25-year-old gardener I had paid $20 an hour to trim my son's hedges, now pressing his bare, tanned chest against her shoulder. The caption mocked me with every letter. Enjoy life while you can. My thumb hovered over the glass. A primal red-hot rage surged from my gut, threatening to bypass my brain entirely. I wanted to smash the phone against the granite tombstone. I wanted to hurl it into the open grave so the device would rot alongside the loyalty she had promised my son. I wanted to march over to her mother, Mrs. Gable, and shove the screen into her face, demanding to know if this was what a sedated, grieving widow looked like. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a dangerous pressure building in an old engine. But I did not scream. I did not break the phone. I am an engineer, and an engineer does not destroy the data when the structure fails. He records it. He measures the cracks. With a trembling hand, I pressed the side buttons. The screen flashed white for a microsecond. Screenshot saved. The evidence was locked away. This was no longer just an insult. It was ammunition. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling its weight against my chest like a cold stone. The rest of the funeral dissolved into a meaningless blur. I stood there as the priest droned on about dust and ashes, but the words sounded like static. Men in expensive raincoats, partners who had made millions from Lucas's patents, filed past me. They shook my hand with soft, damp palms, muttering condolences that felt as hollow as the casket should have been if there was any justice in the world. I nodded. I shook their hands. But behind my eyes, I only saw that turquoise water and that triumphant smile. They were mourning a business opportunity. I was burying my only child while his wife celebrated his exit. As the crowd thinned, dispersing into their luxury sedans to escape the drizzle, I turned and walked toward my old pickup truck. My boots felt heavy, caked with the wet earth of the cemetery. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door, sealing myself inside the smell of old leather and gasoline. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to force my breathing to steady. I needed a plan. I would call Sterling, my lawyer, first thing in the morning. We would freeze the accounts. We would launch a forensic audit. I would spend every dime of my retirement to ensure she never saw a penny of the fortune Lucas had built. I reached for the ignition, ready to leave this place of death, when my phone buzzed against my chest. I ignored it. I did not want to read another empty message from a distant cousin or a former colleague. It buzzed again. Sharp. Urgent. And then a third time. With a heavy sigh, I pulled the phone from my pocket, intending to silence it or turn it off completely. I looked at the screen and the breath jammed in my throat. The name on the notification was Lucas. My brain stalled. For a second, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I stared at the letters, trying to make sense of the impossible. Lucas was dead. I had identified the body. I had signed the papers. I had just watched the earth cover him. Dead men do not send text messages. My hands shook violently as I unlocked the phone. The message app opened, glowing in the dim light of the cab. Dad, help me. Come to the house now. Enter code Omega. Do not trust anyone. I read it once. I read it twice. Code Omega. The words sent a chill racing down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. That was not a random phrase. That was our failsafe. Years ago, when Lucas was just a boy obsessed with ham radios and early coding, we had made up a protocol. Code Omega meant the system had failed completely. It meant absolute emergency. It meant life or death. He had not used those words in 30 years. Was this a sick joke? Had Monica hacked his cloud account to torment me further? Or was it a delayed message sent from a server he had set up before the accident? A final cry for help that arrived too late. The timestamp said, "Now," delivered 1 minute ago. A wild, impossible hope flared in my chest, warring with the logic of my mind. What if the body in the car was not him? What if the accident was staged? The message said, "Do not trust anyone." Did that mean the police? The coroner? Sterling? I looked out the window. The cemetery was nearly empty now, just the workers waiting to fill the hole. I felt a sudden paranoid urge to hide. If Lucas was alive, someone had tried to kill him. And if he was reaching out to me, I was now part of the target. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and twisted the key. The truck's engine roared to life, a rough, dependable sound that grounded me. I didn't care about the speed limit. I didn't care about the wet asphalt. I slammed the gear shift into drive and peeled out of the lot, the tires screeching in protest. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm louder than the engine. I was driving toward a ghost. I was driving toward a trap. I didn't know which. But as I merged onto the highway, speeding toward the sprawling estate, my son called home. The grief that had paralyzed me was replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I was not just a father anymore. I was a man on a mission, and if my son was calling, I would tear down the gates of hell to answer him. The house loomed out of the darkness like a grounded spaceship made of glass and black steel. Lucas had spent $5 million on this place, and every time I visited, I told him it looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed to keep humanity out. He would just laugh and say that in his line of work, keeping people out was the entire point. Now, as I parked my battered truck 2 blocks away under the cover of a weeping willow tree, I understood that he was right. The fortress was locked down, and I was the invader. I pulled my collar up against the relentless Seattle drizzle and began to walk. My boots felt heavy on the pavement. I stuck to the shadows, avoiding the pools of orange light cast by the street lamps. This was a gated community, the kind of place where neighbors sued you if your grass grew half an inch too high, and private security patrols were more common than delivery trucks. I saw the patrol car before I heard it. A white SUV with yellow lights flashing silently on its roof was crawling down the street. It was a private security firm, the expensive kind that Monica had insisted on hiring after Lucas made his first million. I pressed myself flat against the wet bark of a large oak tree, holding my breath. The vehicle moved past me slowly, its tires hissing on the wet asphalt. I saw the guard inside scanning the perimeter. Monica had likely given them strict orders. No visitors, especially not the father-in-law who asked too many questions. When the taillights of the patrol car faded around the bend, I made my move. I sprinted across the manicured lawn, my heart hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I am 72 years old. I have replaced both knees and my back aches when it rains. But tonight, I moved with the desperate agility of a man half my age. I reached the front porch and flattened myself against the wall next to the main entrance. The door was a slab of solid obsidian, featureless, except for a small, glowing blue panel. There was no keyhole. Lucas did not believe in physical keys. He said they were a liability. Everything here was biometric and encrypted. I reached out with a trembling hand and pressed my thumb against the scanner. Access denied. The mechanical voice was cold and polite. A red light pulsed once. I tried the old passcode Lucas had given me years ago. 1980. The year his mother was born. Access denied. Of course. She had changed it. Monica had scrubbed my access just as she was trying to scrub me from the family. I could picture her doing it, laughing with that gardener as she deleted my fingerprints from the system. I took a deep breath. The rain was dripping from the brim of my hat onto my nose. I looked at the keypad. Code Omega. Lucas had told me to use code Omega. I closed my eyes and went back to a memory from 30 years ago. I was in the garage building a model bridge out of balsa wood and glue. Lucas was 10 years old, sitting beside me wearing oversized safety goggles. We were testing the load capacity. We piled weights onto the tiny structure until it groaned. "It is going to break, Dad," Lucas had whispered. "Not yet," I had told him. "It can hold more. It is built to survive the impossible." The bridge had held 342 pounds before snapping. 342. It was the first time I saw him look at me with absolute awe. It was the number that bonded us, the engineer and the boy who would grow up to build invisible bridges in the cloud. I opened my eyes. I typed in the numbers. 3, 4, 2. Then I added the second part of the code. The date he graduated. The panel blinked yellow, then green. "Welcome, Administrator Harrison." The voice was different this time. It wasn't the generic female voice. It was a synthesized version of Lucas's own voice. Hearing it was like a physical blow to the chest. I stood frozen, staring at the door, as the heavy locks disengaged with a series of deep metallic thuds. "Protocol Omega initiated." The voice continued calm and steady. "Security suppression active. You have 15 minutes before a silent alarm is sent to the primary owner's device. Suggestion: move quickly." 15 minutes. The message on the screen faded. 15 minutes before Monica's phone in Cancun started screaming. 15 minutes before she called the police or her hired goons to come and arrest me for breaking and entering. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth of the house hit me first, but it was an artificial, sterile warmth. The hallway was dark, lit only by the low, recessed lighting along the floorboards. I closed the door behind me and the locks automatically slammed home, sealing me in. I stood in the foyer of my dead son's house and shivered. It didn't smell like him anymore. Lucas always smelled like coffee and old paper, even though he worked with computers. He loved hardbound books, but that scent was gone. The air was thick with the smell of industrial-strength bleach and lemon disinfectant. It was overpowering. It stung my nose. Why would a house need to be cleaned this thoroughly? Why would a grieving widow order a deep clean the day after her husband died? I walked further into the living room. My footsteps echoed on the polished marble floors. The furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like ghosts in the dim light. The paintings on the walls, the expensive, abstract art Monica loved, were still there, but the photos were gone. I walked to the mantel where Lucas kept his framed pictures. The photo of us fishing in Montana. Gone. The photo of him and his mother. Gone. Even the pictures of him and Monica were missing. It was as if she was erasing him, not just from the company, but from existence. The silence of the house was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I checked my watch. 14 minutes left. I had to find the computer. I had to find whatever evidence he had left me. But looking at this empty, sanitized mausoleum, a terrible feeling settled in my gut. This wasn't just a cleanup. This was a crime scene that had been scrubbed raw. I moved toward the staircase, my hand sliding along the cold metal railing. I knew where his office was. Second floor, north wing, the room with the reinforced walls. As I climbed, I noticed something on the landing. A faint dark stain on the beige carpet right near the edge of the stairs. It was small, no bigger than a coin. I knelt down, my old knees protesting. I touched it. It was dry, but the texture was stiff. Coffee, or wine, or blood that the cleaners had missed. I stood up, my jaw tightening. The timeline was wrong. Lucas died in a car crash on the highway miles from here. That was the official report. So why was there a stain here? And why did the house smell like a hospital operating room? I reached the top of the stairs and looked down the long, dark hallway toward his office. The door was closed. 12 minutes left. I started to run. Not a sprint, but the steady, determined jog of a man who knows the structure is collapsing and has to find the load-bearing wall before it is too late. I was not just fighting the clock. I was fighting the lie that had been told to the world. And as I reached for the handle of his office door, I prayed that the digital fortress my son had built was stronger than the physical one I was standing in. I had barely taken 3 steps toward the hallway when the silence of the house was shattered. The landline on the marble console table began to ring. Its shrill, mechanical cry bounced off the high ceilings, making me jump. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Who calls a landline in this day and age? Then the large touchscreen on the wall flickered to life. It was the smart home interface. Incoming call. Monica. She knew. She had seen the door unlock notification on her phone in Cancun. The technology that was supposed to protect this house was now her spy. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, to run up the stairs and find the evidence before she could stop me. But if I didn't answer, she would know something was wrong. She would call the police. She would claim I was an intruder. I needed to buy time. I needed to play the role she expected. The confused, grieving old man. I walked over to the console and picked up the receiver. My hand was shaking, but I forced my voice to be steady. "Hello, Harrison, is that you?" Her voice was weak, breathless. It was a masterpiece of acting. If I hadn't seen that photo of her holding a margarita 2 minutes ago, I would have believed she was on her deathbed. "Monica," I said, injecting a note of worry into my tone. "I am at the house. Your mother said you were in the hospital. Are you all right?" "Oh, Dad." She let out a soft whimper. "It has been awful. The doctors say it was anaphylactic shock. Stress-induced. I can barely lift my head. I saw the security alert that the front door opened. I got scared. I thought it was a burglar." I listened closely. Beneath her whispered lies, I could hear it. The faint, rhythmic whoosh of ocean waves. And then something else. A man's laugh. Low and guttural. It was Jack's. He was right there next to her, probably refilling her drink, while she lied to the father of the man she had buried. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. The urge to scream at her, to call her a liar and a murderess, was so strong it tasted like copper in my mouth. But I swallowed it down. I am an engineer. I work with pressure, I do not explode until I choose to. I am sorry to startle you, Monica, I said, my voice flat. I needed to be close to him. I came to get the framed photo of Lucas, the one from his graduation. I want to put it on my mantle. I hope you don't mind. There was a pause. She was calculating, evaluating my lie against her own. Of course, Dad, she said, sweetness dripping from her words like poison honey. Anything you need. But please do not stay long. The alarm system is very sensitive, and I do not want the police showing up and upsetting you. You know how confused you get sometimes. I bristled. Confused. That was her narrative now, painting me as the senile old man. I will be quick, I promised. As she continued to ramble about her imaginary medical treatments, my eyes wandered to the sleek stainless steel trash compactor in the kitchen. The lid was slightly ajar. A piece of packaging was sticking out. It was bright orange. I walked over to it, stretching the phone cord to its limit. Dad, are you still there? She asked, her voice sharpening slightly. Yes, I am here, I said, distracted. Just looking for the photo. I pulled the trash drawer open. It was mostly empty except for a few empty protein shake bottles. Lucas lived on those things, but right on top was a small glass vial. The label had been partially torn off, but I could read the words Vitality Supplement. I picked it up. It felt heavy. I uncorked it and sniffed. The smell hit me instantly. It was not vitamins. It was not protein powder. It was chemical, sharp, acrid. It smelled like the industrial solvent we used to strip rust off steel girders. My stomach churned. This was what she had been feeding him. Vitality. She had been poisoning him slowly, right under everyone's noses. Dad! Her voice was loud now, demanding. What is that noise? What are you doing? I realized I had let the heavy drawer slam shut. Nothing, I said, quickly dropping the vial into my pocket. I bumped into a chair. I am a bit clumsy today. Grief, you know. There was a long silence on the other end. The sound of the waves seemed to get louder. The man's laughter had stopped. Dad, she said, and the weakness was gone from her voice. It was cold now, hard. Leave the house now. You sound unwell. I am calling the security patrol to escort you home, for your own safety. She knew. She sensed the change in my tone. The game was up. I did not say goodbye. I did not wait for her to finish her threat. I slammed the receiver back onto the cradle, severing the connection. I stood there in the silent kitchen, my chest heaving. The clock in my head was ticking louder than ever. She would call the guards. They would be here in minutes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. But not from Lucas this time. It was a notification from the security system again. The one Lucas had given me access to. It was intercepting outgoing messages from the primary user. Outgoing message to Jax, get back to the jet, now. The old man knows something. We have to clean this up tonight. I stared at the screen. They were coming. Not just the guards, but Monica and Jax. They were coming to finish the job. I looked up at the ceiling toward the second floor where the server room waited. Fear washed over me, cold and paralyzing. I was just an old man with a bad back and a wrench in his truck. What could I do against them? Then I touched the vial in my pocket. I thought of Lucas lying in that casket. I thought of the bridge we built together that held 342 pounds. I am not just an old man, I whispered to the empty room. I am a father. And you are about to find out what happens when you try to break a structure that was built to last. I turned and ran toward the stairs. I had evidence to find and a war to start. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the burning protest in my 72-year-old knees. The adrenaline coursing through my veins masked the pain, replacing it with a singular, terrifying focus. I reached the landing and sprinted down the hallway of the north wing. The door to Lucas's office was closed, but unlocked. I threw it open, and the smell of him hit me. Old paper, coffee, and that faint underlying scent of ozone that always seems to linger around high-voltage electronics. The office was dark, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the storm outside. I did not turn on the overhead lights. I could not risk being seen from the driveway if Monica and Jax arrived early. I moved by memory and by the faint gray light filtering through the edges of the drapes. My phone buzzed again with a final instruction from the automated system. Look for the Roman Empire. I knew exactly what that meant. On the massive mahogany bookshelf that covered the entire east wall, there was a leather-bound collection I had given Lucas for his 30th birthday. The History of Roman Engineering. It was his favorite set. He used to say that the Romans understood that a society is only as strong as the roads that connect it. I found the book. It was on the third shelf eye level. I pulled the spine of volume 4. It did not tilt forward like a normal book. Instead, it clicked. A soft, satisfying mechanical sound, like the tumbler of a safe falling into place. The entire section of the bookcase swung silent and smooth on hidden hinges, revealing the steel door behind it. This was the panic room, the server farm, the brain of the house. I pushed the steel door open and stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The room was kept at a constant 60 degrees to protect the equipment. The hum here was louder, a steady drone of cooling fans and spinning hard drives. Rows of blue and green LED lights blinked in the darkness, like the eyes of 1,000 watching insects. In the center of the room sat a single desk with 3 curved monitors. I sat in the chair. It was an expensive ergonomic mesh chair, and it was molded to the shape of my son's body. Sitting in it felt like a violation and a hug all at once. I placed my hands on the desk. The center monitor flickered to life, detecting my presence. There was no password prompt this time. The system had verified me at the front door with the Omega code. Instead, there was just a single video file in the center of the black screen. The file name was simply Dad. My finger hovered over the enter key. I was an engineer. I was used to looking at blueprints that showed me exactly how a building would stand or fall. But looking at that file, I knew I was about to see the blueprint of my son's destruction. I pressed the key. The video player opened. The timestamp in the corner showed it was recorded 7 days ago. When Lucas's face appeared on the screen, I let out a sound that was half gasp and half sob. He looked terrible. The handsome, vibrant man I had raised, the man who ran marathons and hiked mountains, looked like a ghost. His skin was a sickly, translucent yellow. His eyes, usually so bright and sharp, were sunken into dark, hollow sockets. He was sweating even though he was wearing a thick sweater. "Hi, Dad." His voice was a rasp, a dry, scratching sound that tore at my heart. He tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace of pain. "If you are watching this, it means I am dead. And it means the fail-safe protocol worked. I hope you are sitting down." He paused to cough, a wet, rattling cough that shook his thin frame. He took a sip of water from a glass on his desk. "I need you to listen to me carefully, Dad, because I do not have much time left. My kidneys are shutting down. I can feel it. The doctors at the urgent care said it was a viral infection, but they are wrong. I know what is happening to me." He leaned closer to the camera, his yellow eyes intense. "Monica is poisoning me. She has been doing it for months. It is in the protein shakes she makes me every morning. She mixes it with the vanilla powder so I cannot taste the sweetness. But I know the symptoms. It is ethylene glycol, antifreeze." I froze in the chair. My hand went instinctively to the pocket where I had stashed the vial from the trash can. Ethylene glycol. It is an industrial solvent. It is sweet. It is odorless. And it destroys the kidneys, slowly forming crystals that tear the organs apart from the inside. It is an agonizing way to die. Why didn't I go to the police? Lucas continued as if reading my mind. Why didn't I tell you sooner? He looked down at his hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. Because she has leverage, Dad. Terrible leverage. About 6 months ago, she installed hidden cameras in our bedroom. She hired a team to create deepfake videos, realistic AI-generated footage. In these videos, I am a monster. I am beating her. I am abusing her. I am doing things that would make you vomit. Lucas looked up again, and a tear tracked through the sweat on his cheek. She told me that if I tried to leave her, or if I went to the police, she would release the videos to the press. She would destroy the company. The stock would tank. Thousands of employees would lose their jobs. But that is not why I stayed silent. He took a ragged breath. She said she would frame you too. She has falsified emails on your computer, Dad. Emails that make it look like you knew about the abuse. Like you covered it up. She said she would send you to prison as an accessory. She said she would let you die in a cell labeled as a monster who raised a monster. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard I thought the wood might splinter. My son. My foolish, noble son. He had let himself be murdered to protect my reputation. He had absorbed the poison day by day, sip by sip, just to keep me safe from a lie. I could not let that happen, Lucas whispered, his voice fading. I could not let her destroy the name Caldwell. So I made a choice. I stopped taking the antidotes. I let nature take its course. But I did not go quietly. He pointed a shaking finger at the camera lens. I have compiled everything. The bank transfers where she paid the hackers, the raw footage of the deepfakes before they were rendered, and the audio recordings of her talking to Jax about the dosage. It is all here on this hard drive. But Dad, you need to be careful. She is not working alone. Jax is dangerous. He has a record in Florida that she paid to have sealed. The screen flickered. Lucas was struggling to stay upright. You have to take the drive, Dad. Take it to Sterling. Do not trust the local police precinct. Monica has paid off the shift commander. You have to go federal. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. I am sorry I am leaving you alone. I am sorry I cannot be the son who buries his father. But please know that I loved you enough to die for you. Do not let her win. Do not let her take the house. Do not let her take the legacy. Burn it all down if you have to, but do not let her win. The video ended. The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection. I saw an old man with tears streaming down his face into his gray beard. But I also saw something else. I saw the eyes of a man who had nothing left to lose. I sat there for a moment, weeping in that cold, humming room. I cried for the pain he must have endured. I cried for the loneliness of his final days. He had died in this chair alone while his wife planned vacations with her lover. But then the tears stopped. They didn't dry up. They just turned to ice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the vial of poison. I set it on the desk next to the keyboard. You did your part, son, I whispered to the dark screen. You held the weight as long as you could. Now let me take the load. I reached down to the tower of the computer. I did not know how to copy files. I did not know how to encrypt data. But Lucas had said take the drive. I saw the release latch on the side of the casing. I popped the side panel off. I saw the hard drive. It was screwed in, but the screws were thumb screws designed for easy access. Lucas had made it easy for me. I unscrewed them, my fingers working with the precision of a surgeon. I pulled the drive out. It was heavy, cold metal. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket right next to my heart. Then I heard it. From downstairs, the sound of the front door opening. Not the polite click of the electronic lock, but a heavy thud as if it had been kicked or shoved. And then a voice. Monica's voice. High and shrill and panicked. Check the office, Jax. If the old man is here, kill him. I stood up. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I was done crying. It was time to show them that they hadn't just killed a tech CEO. They had awakened a demolition expert. The screen that had held my son's last words suddenly turned a violent, pulsing red. A new window popped up in the center, overlaying his frozen face. It was a progress bar. System purge initiated. Unauthorized access detected. Remote deletion in progress. 10% complete. I stared at it. For a split second, I was paralyzed. It was Monica. She was sitting in that hotel room in Cancun, probably with a laptop on her knees, sipping her margarita, while she erased the last remnants of her husband's existence. She wasn't just killing him. She was unmaking him. 12%. I grabbed the mouse and shook it frantically, trying to find a cancel button. There was none. I pounded on the keyboard, hitting escape, hitting enter, hitting every key I could reach. Nothing happened. The numbers just kept climbing. 15%. I am not a coder. I do not know how to write scripts or hack firewalls. I deal in concrete and steel. I deal in things I can touch, things I can measure, things I can break. And right now I was watching the only evidence that could save my life and avenge my son being eaten by invisible termites. 18%. Think, Harrison, think. If a bridge is collapsing, you do not try to redesign the physics while it falls. You sever the load. You cut the connection. I looked at the back of the computer tower. A tangle of black cables snaked out of it, disappearing into the wall. I reached around and yanked the Ethernet cable. The plastic clip snapped, but the wire came free. I looked back at the screen, expecting the bar to stop. 22%. It was still climbing. Wireless. Of course. Lucas had built redundancies upon redundancies. The system had switched to a backup satellite connection the moment the hard line was cut. He was too smart for his own good, and now his genius was working against me. 25%. I could feel the panic rising in my throat like bile. I looked around the room. I needed a tool. I needed something heavy. My eyes landed on a decorative item on the bookshelf. A vintage iron railroad spike Lucas used as a paperweight. It was solid, heavy, and cold. I grabbed it. 30%. I did not hesitate. I swung the iron spike down onto the tempered glass side panel of the computer tower. The glass shattered with a loud crash, showering the expensive carpet with diamonds. I dropped the spike and reached inside the machine. The heat hit me instantly. The components were running at maximum capacity, the fans screaming like jet engines trying to cool the processors that were working overtime to destroy themselves. It was like reaching into the belly of a furnace. 35%. I saw it. The hard drive. It was a black rectangular block screwed tightly into a metal cage near the bottom. I tried to turn the thumb screws, but they were hot, searingly hot. I hissed in pain, pulling my hand back. My fingertips were red and blistering. 40%. I didn't have time for pain. I didn't have time to be careful. I jammed my hand back inside, ignoring the burning sensation that shot up my arm. I grabbed the drive casing with both hands. The metal bit into my skin. The heat was intense enough to cook meat. I grit my teeth so hard I felt a molar crack. I pulled. The screws held. German engineering. Solid. Unyielding. 45%. I braced my foot against the heavy desk. I grabbed the drive again. This time I didn't try to unscrew it. I pulled with the leverage of a man who has spent 50 years bending rebar. I pulled with the anger of a father who has just watched his son die. I roared. A guttural animal sound that echoed in the small room. Metal screeched against metal. The cage bent. The aluminum frame of the computer case warped. 50%. With one final agonizing heave, I ripped the drive free. The SATA cables snapped with a sound like a pistol shot. The power connector tore loose, sparking blue against the chassis. I fell backward, landing hard on the floor. The drive clutched against my chest. I looked up at the monitors. Signal lost. Boot device missing. The red progress bar was gone. The screen was dead. I lay there panting, the smell of ozone and burnt plastic filling the air. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I looked down at them. My palms were blistered, angry red welts rising on the skin. Blood was trickling from a cut on my thumb, where the sharp metal of the case had sliced me deep. But the drive was safe. It was cooling against my shirt. It was heavy. It felt like the weight of a soul. I sat up, wincing as my back protested. I slipped the drive into the inside pocket of my jacket, zipping it shut. It was safe. I had done it. And then I heard it. Through the thick walls of the panic room, past the heavy curtains of the office. Sirens, not the distant wail of city police. These were close. Sharp, piercing chirps followed by the roar of an engine revving high. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain in my hands. I moved to the window and peeked through the smallest crack in the drapes. Headlights swept across the front lawn, illuminating the rain in silver streaks. A black SUV skidded to a halt in front of the fountain. It wasn't the police. The door flew open. A man stepped out. He was huge, wearing a dark raincoat. Even in the dark, I recognized the swagger, the arrogance. Jax. He hadn't stayed in Cancun. He had flown back. Or maybe he never left. Maybe the photo was staged earlier. He looked up at the house. He looked right at the window where I was standing. He reached into his coat and pulled out something that glinted in the security lights. It was a tire iron. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering a new rhythm of terror. I had the truth in my pocket. But truth is useless if you are dead before you can tell it. I looked at the heavy steel door of the server room. I looked at the shattered computer. I was trapped. And the wolf was at the door. I stepped back from the window and let the heavy velvet curtain fall back into place. My heart was beating so hard against my ribs, I was afraid the sound would give me away. I looked around the server room. It was a steel box, a cage. There was no other exit. I was trapped in the very sanctuary my son had built to keep his secrets safe, and now his killers were walking up the driveway. I heard the front door crash open downstairs. Jax had not bothered with a code. He had kicked it in. The sound of splintering wood and shattering glass echoed up the stairwell like a gunshot. "Find him, Jax." Monica's voice drifted up from the foyer. It was high and shrill, cutting through the silence of the house. "I want that old man found, and I want whatever he took from this house." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, not from age, but from a mixture of rage and adrenaline that felt like electricity in my blood. My right hand was wrapped around the hard drive, the metal warm against my palm. My left hand was empty. I needed a weapon. I scanned the server room. It was filled with delicate electronics, blinking lights and cooling fans. Not exactly an armory. Then my eyes landed on a small technician's toolkit hanging on the side of the main server rack. Lucas liked to do his own maintenance. I reached out and unrolled the canvas pouch. There it was. A ball-peen hammer. It was small, used for tapping pins into place, but it was solid steel with a rubberized grip. I grabbed it. It felt heavy and reassuring. It was a builder's tool, but tonight it would have to serve a different purpose. I heard heavy footsteps thudding on the stairs. They were moving fast. Jax was taking the steps 2 at a time. "Check the master bedroom," Monica yelled from somewhere in the kitchen. "I will check the safe." She was worried about the money. Even now, with a witness loose in the house, her first instinct was to secure the cash. That greed was her weakness, but Jax was different. Jax was a predator. I heard him reach the second-floor landing. He stopped. I held my breath. I pressed my back against the cold steel of the server racks, trying to make myself as small as possible. The hidden door was disguised as a bookshelf. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Seamless, invisible to the naked eye. But it was not soundproof. I smelled ozone. I sniffed the air. The burnt smell from the computer I had just destroyed was filling the small room. If that smell leaked out into the office, Jax would know. I looked down at the floor. My heart stopped. Mud. There was a faint trail of wet gray mud leading from the hidden door across the carpet of the server room. I had tracked it in from the cemetery. Had I left a trail in the office too? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to remember my path. I had walked from the hallway to the bookshelf. I had been careful, but I was soaking wet. The door to the outer office flew open. I flinched as if I had been struck. He was right there. Just 10 feet away, separated only by a wall of false books and a sheet of steel. I heard him breathing. Heavy, ragged breaths like a bull ready to charge. "Harrison," he roared. The name bounced off the walls. He was trying to flush me out. "Come on out, old man. We know you are here." We saw the truck. I gripped the hammer tighter. My knuckles were white. I did not make a sound. I did not move. I was a statue. I was a load-bearing column waiting for the storm. I heard the sound of furniture being overturned. A lamp shattered. Papers were swept off a desk. "He is not in the bedroom," Monica called out. Her voice was closer now. She was coming up the stairs. The click, click, click of her high heels on the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown timer. "He has to be here," Jax grunted. "I can smell him. He smells like wet dog and cheap aftershave." I grit my teeth. I wanted to burst out of that room and wipe the smirk off his face. But I stayed put. The engineer in me took over. Assess the threat. Calculate the structural integrity of the defense. The bookshelf door was reinforced with a steel frame. It locked with magnetic bolts. Unless he had a battering ram or explosives, he could not force it open easily. The only way in was the trigger. The volume 4 of the Roman history book. Did he know? Did Monica know? Lucas never told her anything about his work. She had complained once at a dinner party. He treats his office like the Pentagon. She didn't know, I was sure of it. Monica entered the office. I heard the rustle of her raincoat. "Oh God," she whispered. "Look at this mess. Jax, stop breaking things. We need to sell this house." "Screw the house," Monica Jax snapped. "If that old man has the drive, we are finished. Do you understand? Federal prison. Life without parole." I felt a grim satisfaction. They were scared. Good. Fear makes people sloppy. Fear makes them make mistakes. "Where could he go?" Monica asked, her voice trembling. "The windows are locked. The alarm didn't trip on the perimeter. He is inside." "Maybe he is hiding in the closet," Jax said. I heard the closet door being ripped open. Coat hangers rattled. Boxes were thrown to the floor. "Nothing," Jax spat. I pressed my ear against the back of the hidden door. I could hear them pacing. They were circling the room like sharks. Then silence. The kind of silence that is heavy and thick. "What is that?" Monica asked. What Jax replied. "On the floor. By the bookcase." My stomach dropped. The mud. I had missed a spot. Jax walked across the room. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. He stopped right in front of the hidden door. I could feel his presence through the wood and steel. He was standing inches from me. "It is mud," he said quietly. "Wet mud." "He is here," Monica whispered. "But where? There is no door there. It is just books." Jax didn't answer. I heard him running his hand over the books. I heard his fingers brushing against the leather spines. I raised the hammer. I stepped back, giving myself room to swing. If he found the trigger. If the door opened, I would have one chance. One swing to disable him before he could use that tire iron. I am 72 years old, but I have spent 50 years swinging sledgehammers. I know how to break bone. "This bookcase," Jax muttered. "It looks wrong." "How can a bookcase look wrong?" Monica asked impatiently. We are wasting time. Maybe he went to the attic. No, Jack said. His voice was low-focused. Look at the carpet. There is a groove here. A semicircular groove. Like something heavy has been dragging across it. The weight of the door. Over years of opening and closing, the hidden door had worn a faint track in the expensive rug. Lucas had been careful, but gravity is relentless. Jax tapped on the wood of the shelf. Thump, thump, thump. Then he tapped harder. Clang, the sound of metal beneath the wood veneer. It is a door, he said. His voice was filled with a terrible triumph. It is a fake door. Open it, Monica screamed. Open it now. I do not see a handle, Jack said. He was pulling at the shelves now. The books rattled. The entire structure shook, but the magnetic locks held firm. Stand back, he growled. I braced myself. I widened my stance. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale, recycled air of the panic room. This was it, the point of failure, the moment when the stress exceeds the load capacity. I heard the whistle of air as he swung the tire iron. Crack! The wood of the bookshelf splintered. The impact shook the door violently. Dust fell from the ceiling of the server room. He hit it again, and again. The false front was breaking away, revealing the steel plate underneath. He is in there, Monica yelled. Harrison, come out, and we can talk. We can make a deal. I did not answer. There are no deals with the devil. Jax hit the door one more time with a primal roar. The tire iron rang against the steel like a church bell. But the door held. It was designed to withstand a bomb blast. A thug with a metal bar was not going to get in. Not yet. But then the noise stopped. I heard heavy breathing on the other side. He is locked in. Jax panted. We cannot break this down. Not with this. So what do we do? Monica cried. He has a phone in there. He is probably calling the police right now. No, Jax said. His voice dropped to a sinister whisper that chilled me to the bone. This is a server room, right? Electronics. Needs cooling. Needs air. What are you thinking? Monica asked. I heard Jax walking away from the door. I heard him rummaging through the destroyed office. We smoke him out, he said. I froze. The ventilation system. The intake vents were in the hallway. If they blocked them, or worse, if they introduced something into the air supply. I saw the vent near the floor of the server room. It was humming softly, pulling in cool air to keep the servers from overheating. Start a fire, Jack said. Burn the curtains. Throw them in the intake vent. We will turn this little safe room into a gas chamber. No, Monica said. You will burn the house down. Do you want to go to prison? Monica, Jack shouted. Do you want to wear an orange jumpsuit for the rest of your life? We burn him out. We get the drive. And then we blame the fire on the old man. We say he went crazy with grief and set the place on fire with himself inside. It is perfect. I heard the flick of a lighter. I looked at the vent. I looked at the hammer in my hand. The fortress that was supposed to save me was about to become my oven. I had minutes, maybe less. I looked at the back wall of the server room. It was reinforced concrete, underground, no way out. But wait. Lucas was an engineer too. He was my son. He knew about airflow. He knew about backdrafts. I looked up at the ceiling. There was a maintenance hatch, small, barely big enough for a man. It led to the crawl space between the floors. I grabbed the ladder on the side of the rack. I am coming for you, Harrison, Jax yelled through the door. I hope you like it hot. I started to climb. I was not going to die here. Not today. I had a story to tell, and I was going to be the one to write the ending. I pulled myself deeper into the crawl space, dragging my heavy boots over the wooden joists as silently as a ghost. The air up here was stale and thick with the smell of fiberglass insulation and 30 years of accumulated dust. Below me, the sounds of violence had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. I lay flat on my stomach, pressing my face against the rough plywood of the subfloor. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to slow down. I needed to be more than just a terrified old man hiding in the ceiling. I needed to be a surveillance device. I crawled forward inch by painful inch until I reached a small ventilation grate that looked down into the office. Through the metal slats I could see them. The lighting was dim, but I saw the shadows stretching across the ruined carpet. Jax was standing by the shattered remains of the computer, his chest heaving. He was holding the tire iron loosely in his hand, swinging it back and forth like a pendulum. Monica was pacing near the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "He is not in the panic room," Jax growled. His voice drifted up through the vent, clear and distorted only slightly by the metal. I smoked it out. If he was in there, he would have come out coughing by now. "Then where is he?" Monica snapped, spinning around to face him. "A man that size does not just vanish, Jax. He has the drive. He has the evidence. If he walks out that front door and goes to the FBI, we are done. Do you understand that? My life is over. Your life is over." Jax spat on the floor. A glob of saliva landed on the expensive Persian rug. "So we kill him," he said. It was a casual statement, as if he were suggesting they order pizza. I flinched in the darkness. My fingers dug into the insulation. Hearing your own death discussed with such indifference is a cold shock that no amount of life experience can prepare you for. "We find him." Jax continued, his voice dropping to a low, menacing rumble. "I know this house. There are only so many places to hide. Maybe he is in the guest room. Maybe he is in the garage trying to hotwire a car. When I find him, I do not want to waste time talking. I snap his neck. Quick. Clean. Then we drag him to the bottom of the main staircase. We put a little alcohol on his shirt. We say the grieving father got drunk, broke in to reminisce, slipped and fell. Tragedy. Case closed." I felt a wave of nausea. It was a brutal, simple plan, and it would work. Who would question it? An old man distraught over his son's funeral, dying in an accident. It was the perfect cover. No, Monica said. I waited, hoping to hear a shred of humanity in her voice, hoping that somewhere deep down she remembered that I was the grandfather of her nieces, the father of the man she had married. "You are so short-sighted, Jax," she hissed. Her voice was not filled with mercy. It was filled with greed. "If he dies tonight, we lose everything," she said. "Think. Use that thick head of yours. Lucas's life insurance is 10 million, yes. But Harrison has assets." I held my breath. What was she talking about? "He has a pension, Jax," she explained, her tone condescending. "He was a lead structural engineer for the federal government for 40 years. Do you know what his lump sum payout is? $2 million. And he has that beach house in Florida, the one on the private island. That is another 3 million in real estate." I closed my eyes. My pension. The money I had saved by working double shifts in freezing rain and scorching heat. The money I had set aside to leave to Lucas. And the Florida house, the place where my late wife and I had spent our final happy years together. She had appraised my life and put a price tag on it. So what? Jax asked impatiently. "We get it when he dies anyway, right? He has no other heirs." "No," Monica shouted. "If he dies without a will, or if the estate goes into probate, it could take years. The state will take a cut. Taxes will eat us alive. And there is a chance he left it to charity. I need control, Jax. I need total control of his assets while he is still alive." I listened, the bile rising in my throat. "So what is the plan?" Jax asked, leaning against the desk. I have already started the paperwork, Monica said. Her voice dropped to a whisper, a conspiratorial hiss that chilled me more than the damp air of the crawlspace. I have a doctor on payroll. Dr. Eris. He has already drafted a preliminary diagnosis based on the medical records I falsified last month. Diagnosis of what Jax asked. Rapid onset Alzheimer's, Monica said. Severe dementia with paranoid delusions. I froze. My hands, which had been shaking with fear, suddenly went still. Alzheimer's. The one thing I feared more than death. The loss of my mind. The loss of my agency. She was planning to gaslight the legal system to strip me of my rights. We catch him tonight, Monica continued. We do not kill him. We restrain him. We inject him with a high dose of hallucinogens. When the police come, we say he broke in screaming about conspiracies and ghosts. We show them the medical papers. We commit him Jax. We put him in that state facility out in the marshlands. The cheap one with the barred windows and the understaffed night shift. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. He sits there drooling in a wheelchair, staring at a wall while I get power of attorney, she said. I liquidate his pension. I sell the Florida house. And he rots away until his heart finally gives out. It is cleaner. It is smarter. And it is legal. Jax laughed. It was a cruel, appreciative sound. You are a witch, Monica. A real wicked witch. I like to think of myself as an investor, she replied. Now stop standing there. Check the attic access. Check the basement. Find him. And remember, do not break his skull, just break his spirit. I heard Jax moving. I heard the heavy thud of his boots heading toward the hallway. I lay there in the dark, and something inside me changed. The fear evaporated. The panic that had been driving me since I left the cemetery, the frantic need to just survive it, was gone. In its place was something cold, something hard, something heavy. I thought of Lucas dying alone in that chair, poisoned by the woman he loved. I thought of my wife's house in Florida being sold to fund their vacations. I thought of myself locked in a room, drugged and forgotten, my legacy erased. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted to dismantle me. They wanted to take the structure of my life and pull it apart brick by brick until I was nothing but rubble. But they forgot one thing. I am an engineer. I know how to build, but I also know how to destroy. I know exactly where to place the charge to bring the whole building down. I reached into my pocket and touched the hard drive. It was cool now. I touched the hammer in my other hand. I was done hiding. I was done being the victim. I was not a vegetable. I was not a senile old man. I rolled over onto my back in the cramped space. I looked at the darkness above me. You want a monster, Monica, I whispered into the silence. You just created one. I moved toward the attic hatch, not to escape, but to position myself. The hunter became the hunted, and the hunted had just decided to bite back. I watched from the darkness of the ceiling hatch as the metal door below finally gave way. The sound was not a clean break, but a tortured scream of steel tearing away from its frame. Jax had used the tire iron as a lever, and with one final grunt of exertion, he popped the magnetic lock that held the sanctuary closed. The door swung inward, revealing the server room bathed in the eerie blue glow of the backup lights. I held my breath, pressing my face against the grate. I knew what was waiting for him down there. Before I had climbed the ladder, I had made one critical adjustment to the room's environment. The server farm was cooled by a high-pressure liquid carbon dioxide system, designed to flood the room and extinguish electrical fires without damaging the data. It was a safety feature, a life-saving device. But in the hands of a desperate engineer, safety features become weapons. I had used the wrench from the toolkit to loosen the regulator valve on the main tank, and I had jury-rigged the release pin to the tension of the door hinge using a stripped Ethernet cable. It was a simple trap, a tension trigger, the kind of thing a boy learns making snares in the woods, but applied with industrial pressure. Jax stepped across the threshold. He was smiling. I could see the glint of his teeth in the low light. He raised the tire iron ready to strike at a man he thought was cowering in the corner. He took one step, then another. The cable pulled tight. The sound was deafening. It was like a jet engine igniting in a closet. The main seal on the carbon dioxide tank blew out, releasing hundreds of pounds of freezing gas in a fraction of a second. A wall of white fog exploded outward. It hit Jack squarely in the chest with the force of a physical blow. This was not just smoke. This was gas expanding at a rate that dropped the ambient temperature to sub-zero instantly. Jack screamed, but the sound was cut short as the oxygen was sucked out of his lungs. He was blinded. He was freezing. He staggered back, dropping the tire iron, which clattered uselessly on the floor. His hands clawed at his face, trying to wipe away the frost that was forming on his skin. He fell backward, tripping over his own feet, and landing hard on the hallway floor just outside the door. This was my moment. I did not climb down the ladder rung by rung. I did not have the time. I let go of the hatch rim and dropped. I hit the floor of the server room hard. My ankles flared with pain and my knees buckled, absorbing the impact. I rolled forward instinctively, using the momentum to spring back to my feet. The room was filling with white mist, swirling and cold, but I knew the layout. I held my breath to avoid inhaling the suffocating gas and lunged toward the doorway. Jax was on the ground, trying to rise. He was gasping for air, his face red and confused, his eyes streaming with tears from the cold shock. He looked up and saw me emerging from the fog like a vengeful ghost. For a second, he looked terrified. He reached out a hand, blindly trying to grab my leg. I did not stop. I did not hesitate. I remembered the pictures of my son. I remembered the poison in the trash can. I stepped forward and drove the heel of my heavy work boot down. I aimed for the center of his body, right between his legs. The impact was solid. It was the only language a man like Jax understood. He let out a high-pitched wheezing sound and curled into a fetal ball, clutching himself. He was incapacitated. The predator had been reduced to a whimpering mess on the floor. I stepped over him. I could have hit him again. I could have picked up the tire iron and finished it right there. The rage in my blood screamed for it. But I had the drive in my pocket. I had the truth. And my mission was not murder. My mission was justice. And justice happens in the light, not in the dark hallway of a house built on lies. Monica was screaming somewhere downstairs. She must have heard the explosion of gas. She would be coming. I ran through the ruined office, ignoring the shattered glass from the computer case that crunched under my boots. I headed for the north window. It was a floor-to-ceiling pane of reinforced glass. It did not open. Lucas liked his security. I grabbed the heavy velvet chair from behind the desk. It was solid oak. I lifted it with a strength I didn't know I possessed, a strength born of pure adrenaline and survival instinct. I swung it with everything I had. The glass shattered. It rained down onto the patio below in a glittering cascade. I didn't look down. I climbed onto the sill. The rain hit my face, instantly cold and sharp. It felt like a baptism. I jumped. It was not a long drop, only about 10 feet to the soft earth of the garden bed below. But for a 72-year-old man, it was a leap of faith. I landed in the mud, rolling to distribute the shock. My shoulder slammed against the ground, and I felt something pop, but I scrambled up, ignoring the screaming protest of my joints. I was out. I was in the backyard. The rain was torrential, a sheet of gray water that obscured the world. I clutched my jacket tight, ensuring the hard drive was secure against my chest. I heard Monica screaming from the broken window above. "He is running! Jax, get up! Get the gun! Gun!" I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and sprinted toward the perimeter fence. I didn't go for the front gate. That was where the security patrol would be. I headed for the back, where the property bordered the dense woodland that separated the estate from the old service road. My boots slipped in the mud. Branches whipped my face, drawing blood. I fell once, tasting the dirt and pine needles, but I scrambled back up on all fours and kept moving. I was an animal now, a hunted creature driven by a singular purpose. I reached the fence. It was 6 feet high wrought iron. I threw my jacket over the spikes at the top to protect myself and pulled myself up. My muscles burned. My heart felt like it was going to burst through my chest. But I vaulted over, landing hard on the wet asphalt of the road on the other side. I grabbed my jacket and checked the pocket. The drive was still there. I stood up, panting in the rain. I looked back at the house. I could see lights turning on in every room. I could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness of the yard. They were coming. I turned away from the house. I turned away from the life I had known. My truck was parked 2 blocks away, but I couldn't go there. They knew my license plate. They would be waiting. I couldn't go home either. My house would be the first place they looked. They would have paid off cops waiting to arrest the senile old man. I looked toward the distant glow of the city skyline. Seattle, a maze of steel and concrete, a place where a man could disappear, a place where I had friends who understood loyalty. I started to walk. I kept to the shadows, staying off the main road. I was cold. I was wet. I was in pain. But as I walked, the rhythm of my boots on the pavement began to sound like a drumbeat of war. I am Harrison Caldwell. I built the bridge over the Narrows. I survived the collapse of '89, and I will survive this. I walked into the night, leaving the ghost of my son behind, but carrying his voice in my pocket. The real storm was just beginning. I pounded on the heavy oak door of the townhouse in the rain. My fist was raw and bloody from the fence climb, but I did not feel the pain. I only felt the cold weight of the hard drive against my ribs. It was 3 in the morning. The streetlights of downtown Seattle reflected in the puddles like spilled oil. I was shivering uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the aftershock of the adrenaline that had carried me out of that house. The porch light flickered on. I heard the slide of a deadbolt. The door opened a crack, revealing a slice of warm yellow light and the weary face of Arthur Sterling. He was wearing a silk robe over his pajamas, his white hair disheveled. He held a baseball bat in one hand, but when he saw me, his grip loosened. Harrison. He stared at me. He took in my torn jacket, my muddy boots, the blood dripping from my fingers. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He pulled the door wide open and ushered me inside. "Get in," he said, his voice rough with sleep, but sharp with concern. "Get in before you catch pneumonia." He led me into his study. It was a room that smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco, a scent that had comforted me for 40 years. Sterling poured me a glass of brandy. I drank it in one gulp, feeling the fire burn away the chill in my throat. I sat in the wingback chair, leaving a stain of mud on the expensive upholstery. But Sterling didn't blink. He sat opposite me, his eyes locked on mine. "Tell me," he said. I didn't speak. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the hard drive. I placed it on the mahogany desk between us. "Lucas was murdered," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow, flat, like a ghost story. "Monica poisoned him. And tonight she tried to kill me." Sterling looked at the drive, then back at me. He was a lawyer. He dealt in facts, not emotions. But he was also my friend. He saw the truth in my eyes. He stood up and went to his computer. He connected the drive. For the next hour, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional sharp intake of breath from Sterling as he watched the videos and read the logs. When he finally turned around, his face was pale. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It is monstrous, Harrison," he whispered. "It is absolutely monstrous." "Then we have her," I said, leaning forward. "We go to the police, we arrest her." Sterling shook his head slowly. The look on his face made my stomach drop. "Harrison, listen to me. I believe you. I believe every word of this. But the law is a machine and it needs fuel. This drive contains a dying declaration from Lucas. It is powerful, but it is unilateral. Monica's defense team will tear it apart. They will say he was delirious from kidney failure. They will say the deepfakes were just role play. Without a body to autopsy, without toxicology reports showing the poison in his system, it is your word against hers. I slammed my fist on the arm of the chair. She confessed, I said. I heard her. She told Jax to kill me, Hearsay Sterling said gently. Unless you recorded it, it never happened. If we go to the police now, she will claim you are senile and paranoid just like she planned. She will use those medical records she forged to have you committed. And while you are locked up, she will destroy the rest of the evidence. I slumped back in the chair. The hopelessness washed over me again. I had risked everything. I had almost died. And for what? For a story no one would believe. So she wins, I asked. She kills my son, takes my money, and walks away, laughing. Sterling turned back to the screen. He was clicking through the files again, his brow furrowed. Wait, he murmured. What? Lucas was not just a coder, Harrison Sterling said, his eyes scanning the lines of data on the screen. He was a paranoid genius. He knew there was a chance the legal system would fail him. He built a back door not into the house, but into the money. I stood up and walked to the desk, looking over his shoulder. The will Monica is trying to execute gives her control of the liquid assets, and the company, Sterling explained, pointing to a complex diagram on the screen. But look here. Subsection Delta. It refers to a shadow trust. What is a shadow trust, I asked. It is a holding entity that does not exist on public ledgers, Sterling said, his voice rising with excitement. It holds the majority of his cryptocurrency, his offshore stocks, and the intellectual property rights to his new chip. It is worth 10 times what is in the bank accounts Monica is fighting for. And who controls it, I asked. Sterling clicked a file named Keyholder. A window popped up. It showed a 3D model of a human eye. You do, Sterling said. Me. Lucas transferred ownership of the Shadow Trust to you 3 days before he died, Sterling said. But he locked it. It is not protected by a password. It is protected by a retinal scan. Biometrics. I stared at the screen. My son had bet everything on me. He knew Monica could steal passwords. She could forge signatures. But she could not steal my eyes. This is the leverage, Sterling said, turning to me, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. Monica thinks she is fighting for the kingdom, but she is fighting for the scraps. The real treasure is locked in a vault that only you can open. So we take the money, I said. We leave her with nothing. No, Sterling said. His voice dropped to a cold whisper. That is not enough. If we just take the money, she still walks free. She still killed Lucas. We need her to fall Harrison. We need her to admit it. And to do that, we need to give her exactly what she wants. What do you mean? We bait the trap, Sterling said. We make her believe she has won. We make her believe you are the broken, senile old man she wants you to be. You are going to call her. You are going to apologize. You are going to offer to sign over your power of attorney. I felt a surge of revulsion. You want me to beg her? I want you to bring her into the light, Sterling said. We arrange a signing ceremony, a public one. We invite the press. We invite the board members. She will love that because she is a narcissist. She will want to parade her victory. And then I asked, and then Sterling said, tapping the hard drive, we play this movie on the big screen. But we need more. We need her to say it. Tonight she was sloppy because she thought no one was listening. Tomorrow we will be listening. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a button. A wire, I asked. Better, Sterling said. A broadcast transmitter. Lucas's own tech. We plant this on you. When you get close to her when she thinks she is safe and starts gloating, you get her to talk. You get her to say one thing that corroborates the video. And the moment she does, we drop the hammer. I looked at the small device. I looked at my hands still shaking slightly from the cold. I had spent my life building things that stood tall. Now I was going to build a stage for a tragedy where the villain would take her final bow. Call her, I said to Sterling. Tell her the old man is ready to surrender. Sterling picked up the phone. And Harrison, he added his hand on the receiver. You are a terrible actor, so do not act. Be the grieving father. Be the confused old man. Let her underestimate you one last time. It will be the last mistake she ever makes. I nodded. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain. The storm was still raging over Seattle, but the storm inside me had settled. I had a plan. I had a partner. And I had the eyes of a father who had seen too much. Make the call, Sterling, I said. Let us invite her to her own funeral. The morning sun broke over the Seattle skyline, but it brought no warmth to the guest room of Sterling's townhouse. The light was gray and diffused, filtering through the heavy curtains like dirty water. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the phone in my hand. It was an old landline receiver that Sterling kept on his desk, a heavy piece of black plastic that felt like an artifact from a different era. My hands were clean now. The mud and blood from the night before had been scrubbed away, leaving my skin raw and pink, but the dirt beneath my fingernails felt permanent. Sterling stood by the window sipping his coffee. He did not look at me. He was giving me space to prepare. We had spent the last 3 hours rehearsing the script, not with words, but with tone. I had to become the very thing I despised. I had to become the broken, confused old man that Monica wanted me to be. I had to shed the skin of the engineer and put on the skin of the victim. It was the hardest structural load I had ever been asked to carry because it required me to crush my own pride. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. I thought of the cold server room. I thought of the gas explosion. But mostly, I thought of the look on Jax's face when he talked about snapping my neck. I let that fear, that genuine terror I had felt for a fleeting second, wash over me. I let it seep into my voice. I let my hand tremble not with rage, but with a manufactured frailty. I picked up the receiver and dialed. The ringback tone purred in my ear. 1, 2, 3. Hello. Her voice was sharp, alert. She was awake. Of course she was awake. She was probably pacing the floor of that fortress, wondering where the body was. Monica, I whispered. I let my voice crack on the second syllable. Monica, is that you? There was a pause, a silence so thick I could hear the static on the line. She was calculating. She was checking the caller ID. She saw it was Sterling's number. Dad, she said. Her tone shifted instantly. It went from sharp to a sickeningly sweet concern. Oh my God, Dad, where are you? We have been looking everywhere for you. I was so worried. I was about to call the police. I leaned forward, hunched over the desk, making myself small. I do not know, Monica, I stammered. I think I am at Arthur's house. I came here in the night. I was so scared. Scared of what, Dad? She asked. She was fishing. She wanted to know how much I remembered. She wanted to know if I was a witness or a patient. The men, I said, letting a sob escape my throat. There were men at the house, Monica. In the walls, I heard them whispering them. They were coming out of the books. I tried to find Lucas, but the books were eating him. I waited. It was a gamble. I was feeding her the narrative she had created. The dementia, the paranoia, the hallucinations. Oh, Dad, she sighed, and I could practically hear the smile spreading across her face. Those were not men. You were having an episode. Remember, Dr. Aris told us this might happen. The stress of the funeral. It is making you see things that are not there. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. I suppose so, I said, sounding defeated. I ran. I ran until my legs hurt. And now I am just so tired, Monica. I am so incredibly tired. I know you are, she cooed. You are not well, Dad. You need rest. You need someone to take care of you. Listen, stay right there. I will come pick you up. We can go see the doctor together. No, I said quickly. Then I caught myself and softened the tone. No, I do not want to go to the doctor yet. I just want this to be over. What do you want to be over, Dad? Everything I said. The fighting. The confusion. I looked at the papers Sterling had laid out on the desk in front of me. They were dummy documents, meaningless legal jargon. I cannot handle the company, Monica. I cannot handle the accounts. The numbers. They dance around on the page. I try to look at them and I get a headache. You were right. You were right about everything. I am too old. I heard her intake of breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment the fortress gates opened from the inside. Dad, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper of mock reverence. You are making the right choice. Lucas would want you to rest. He would want me to carry this burden for you. I know, I said. I want to sign it over. All of it. The voting rights, the properties, the pension access. I want you to be my guardian, Monica. I just want to sit in the garden and feed the birds. I do not want to think anymore. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to vomit. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Okay, Dad, she said, and I could hear the greed dripping from every syllable. Okay, I can help you with that. I have the papers ready. I can come to Sterling's office right now. We can sign them, and then I will take you home. I paused. This was the pivot point, the engineering of the trap. No, I said. Not here. It is too dark here, and not at the house. The house scares me now. Then where she asked, a hint of impatience creeping in. I want to do it properly, I said. I want to honor Lucas. If I am giving up his legacy, I want people to know it is because I trust you. I want the investors to see. I want the board members to see. What are you saying, Dad? I want to hold a ceremony, I said. A small luncheon. Today. At the Ritz downtown. I want you to invite the press, Monica. I want to give a speech. I want to tell everyone that you are the new head of the Caldwell family. I want to hand you the keys in front of the world so no one can ever question your authority. There was silence on the other end. I held my breath. Was I pushing too hard? Was it too theatrical? But I knew Monica. I knew her structural weakness. It was not money. It was vanity. She didn't just want to be rich. She wanted to be admired. She wanted to be the grieving widow who stepped up to save the empire from her senile father-in-law. She wanted the magazine covers. A press conference, she said, slowly testing the word. Yes, I said. And the board of directors. Call them. Tell them Harrison is stepping down. Tell them I am proud of you. I could feel her ego inflating through the phone line. It was expanding, filling the void where her conscience should have been. That is a beautiful idea, Dad, she said. You are right. It is important for the stock price. It shows stability. A public transition of power. Exactly, I said. Can you arrange it? By noon. I can make some calls, she said. Her voice was brisk now, businesslike. She was already planning her outfit. She was already rehearsing her acceptance speech. I will rent the ballroom. I will get the legal team there. You just bring yourself, Dad, and try to clean up. You sound messy. I will, I said. I will wear my best suit. Good, she said. See you at noon. And Dad, do not wander off again. The monsters might come back. She hung up. The click of the line disconnecting echoed in the quiet room. I slowly lowered the receiver back to its cradle. My hand was shaking, but this time it was not an act. It was the aftershock of intimacy with a predator. Sterling looked at me. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He just nodded a slow, solemn nod of respect. She bought it, he asked. She bought it, I said, standing up. My knees popped, but I felt stronger than I had in years. She thinks she is walking into a coronation. Sterling stood up and walked to the closet. He pulled out a garment bag. Then let us get you dressed, he said. If we are going to a funeral, we should look the part. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I washed the mud from my hair. I shaved my face, watching the gray stubble fall into the sink. The face staring back at me in the mirror was lined and weathered. It was a map of 72 years of gravity and stress. But the eyes were clear. The fog of grief had lifted. I walked back into the bedroom. Sterling had laid the suit out on the bed. It was a charcoal gray 3-piece suit. Wool, Italian. Lucas had bought it for me for his wedding. He had told me I looked like a titan in it. I put on the white shirt, starching stiff against my skin. I fastened the cufflinks' silver knots that caught the dull light. I pulled on the trousers and the waistcoat, buttoning them with steady fingers. Then I picked up the tie. It was blue, a deep oceanic blue with a pattern of tiny sailboats. It was a whimsical tie, the kind Lucas loved. He had given it to me on Father's Day 2 years ago. You are the anchor, Dad, he had said, laughing, and I am the ship. You keep me from drifting. I held the silk fabric in my hands. The texture was smooth and cool. I am still the anchor, son, I whispered. I wrapped the tie around my neck. I tied a Windsor knot. Perfect, symmetrical, tight. I tightened it until I could feel my pulse against the fabric. It felt like armor. It felt like a promise. I put on the jacket. I checked the inside pocket. The hard drive was there. The small black transmitter Sterling had given me was clipped to the inside of my lapel, invisible but active. I looked at Sterling. He was wearing his own suit, holding a briefcase that contained nothing but blank paper and a single loaded gun. Ready? He asked. I walked to the door. I did not look like a confused old man anymore. I stood straight, my spine aligned, my shoulders back. I looked like what I was. A structural engineer going to a demolition site. I am ready, I said. Let us go give her the legacy she deserves. The ballroom of the Ritz was a cavern of gold and crystal filled with the murmuring of the city's elite. Monica had outdone herself. She had turned my son's memorial into the social event of the season. There were black lilies on every table and a string quartet playing somber versions of pop songs in the corner. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd with trays of champagne because apparently nothing helps people mourn a tragedy like vintage French sparkling wine. I stood at the back of the room next to Sterling, adjusting the cuffs of my jacket. The transmitter clipped to my lapel felt hot against my chest. I scanned the room. I saw the board members of Lucas's company huddled together, looking grave and concerned about their stock options. I saw the reporters near the front, their cameras ready to capture the moment the empire changed hands. And I saw Jax. He was standing near the stage, dressed in a suit that was too tight across his broad shoulders. He was trying to look like a professional security detail, but he looked like what he was. A thug in borrowed clothes. He was scanning the crowd, his eyes darting back and forth, looking for threats. He didn't look at me. To him, I was already neutralized. I was just the confused old man who was about to sign his life away. Sterling leaned in close to my ear. Remember, he whispered, you are frail. You are overwhelmed. Make them pity you. I nodded. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed the muscles in my face, letting my jaw hang slightly loose. I took a shuffling step forward, leaning heavily on the cane Sterling had provided. Monica saw me. She was standing on the low stage, holding a microphone, her other hand resting theatrically on a podium draped in black velvet. She was wearing a simple black dress that was modest enough for a widow, but tight enough to show off the results of her gym sessions with Jax. She looked radiant in a predatory way. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice amplifying through the room, soft and trembling. "Please, if I could have your attention." The room went quiet. The quartet stopped playing. "He is here," she said, extending a hand toward me. "The patriarch of our family. The man who raised the husband I loved so dearly. Please welcome Harrison Caldwell." Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, pitying applause. I walked down the center aisle. I kept my eyes on the floor. I let my hand shake as I gripped the cane. I heard the whispers as I passed. "Poor man. He looks terrible. I heard he has lost his mind." Good. Let them whisper. Let them underestimate the structural integrity of the man they were looking at. I reached the stairs to the stage. Jax stepped forward to help me up. His hand gripped my arm hard. It wasn't a helping hand. It was a warning squeeze. A reminder of the violence he was capable of. "Easy there, old-timer," he muttered so only I could hear. "Just sign the papers and go home." I looked up at him. I let my eyes go wide and vacant. "Thank you, young man," I mumbled. "Thank you for helping me." I stumbled onto the stage. Monica was there, instantly wrapping her arms around me in a hug that looked affectionate to the cameras, but felt like a python constricting its prey. She smelled of expensive perfume and the faint metallic scent of fear. "I am so proud of you, Dad," she whispered into my ear. "Just get this over with." She led me to a small antique table set up in the center of the stage. On it sat a stack of legal documents bound in blue folders. Next to them lay a heavy gold fountain pen. Monica turned back to the microphone. "My father-in-law has been through so much," she told the crowd, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. "The grief of losing Lucas has been overwhelming for him. He has decided that at this stage in his life he needs peace. He has asked me to take on the heavy burden of managing the Caldwell estate and the future of the company so that he can retire with dignity." She looked at me, her eyes shining with triumph. "Dad, the floor is yours." I stood behind the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the red lights of the recording cameras. I saw the hungry look in the eyes of the investors. I reached into my pocket. My hand was shaking, but I made sure the movement looked like the tremors of age. I pulled out my phone. Monica stepped forward slightly, her smile tightening. "Dad, the pen is right there," she said, pointing to the table. "I know," I said into the microphone. My voice was raspy. "But before I sign, before I give it all up, I wanted to show you something. A memory." Monica froze. This was not in the script. "What memory, Dad?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. I found a picture," I stammered. "On my phone. I want everyone to see Lucas one last time, before I go." I turned to the large projection screen behind the stage. It was currently displaying a black and white photo of Lucas smiling. The cable to connect a device was dangling from the podium intended for presentations. I grabbed the cable. My hands fumbled with the connector. "Dad." "No," Monica hissed, stepping closer. "We do not have time for this. Sit down and sign." Jax started to move toward me from the side of the stage. "Please," I begged, playing the pathetic old man to the hilt. "Just one picture. For my boy." I jammed the connector into the port. Sterling was ready. He was sitting in the front row, his hand on his laptop. He bypassed the venue's display protocols instantly. The screen flickered. The black and white photo of Lucas vanished. In its place, a massive high-definition image exploded onto the wall. It was blue, vibrant turquoise blue. The gasp from the audience was audible. It sucked the air out of the room. There was Monica, 10 feet tall, wearing the white bikini, holding the margarita. And there was Jax, shirtless and sweating, laughing beside her. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. Yesterday. The location tag burned bright. Ritz-Carlton, Cancun. And the caption, "Enjoy life while you can." Monica stood paralyzed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. Jack stopped in his tracks. He stared at the image of himself looming over the crowd. But I wasn't done. I tapped the screen of my phone. Audio file playing. The speakers of the ballroom crackled. Then Monica's voice filled the room, loud and crystal clear. It was the recording from the crawl space the night before. "Giet not lao jiadi. Tao sajan kan lao dot nyup roi nga ko tang." Kill the old man. I will stage it like the break-in, and he fell down the stairs. The crowd erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up in shock. The reporters rushed forward, their cameras flashing blindly. No, Monica screamed. "That is fake, that is AI, he is crazy." But the audio continued. Jax's voice rumbled through the speakers. "I snap his neck. Quick, clean." Then we drag him to the bottom of the main staircase. Monica lunged for me. Her mask was gone. Her face was twisted into a snarl of pure animal rage. She reached for the cable, trying to rip it out of the phone. But I was faster. I was an engineer, and I knew how to hold my ground. I sidestepped her, letting her stumble in her high heels. I tapped the phone one last time. The video file. The Cancun photo vanished. And there was Lucas, my son, dying, yellow-skinned, sweating. "Hi, Dad." The room went deathly silent. Even the reporters stopped shouting. "If you are watching this, it means I am dead, and it means Monica killed me." Lucas's voice was weak, but it carried the weight of the grave. "She is poisoning me with ethylene glycol. Antifreeze. She is doing it for the money, Dad. She and Jax. They are going to frame you." Monica let out a shriek that sounded inhuman. She turned to run, but she had nowhere to go. She was center stage in a room full of witnesses. Jax realized the game was over. He didn't try to explain. He didn't try to deny. He reached into his jacket. He wasn't reaching for a phone. He was reaching for the gun. I saw the glint of metal. "Gun!" I shouted, dropping the cane and standing tall. Panic erupted. People screamed and dove under tables. But before Jax could draw, Sterling stood up from the front row. He didn't have a weapon in his hand. He simply pointed to the side doors. "Police!" he yelled. The doors burst open, not private security. SWAT! They poured into the room in tactical gear, their weapons raised. They had been listening. Sterling had live-streamed the entire audio feed to the captain of the precinct. Jax froze. He looked at the cops, then at the exit, then at me. I looked him in the eye. I didn't flinch. I stood there in my charcoal suit, the tie my son gave me tight around my neck. "It is over, Jax," I said, my voice steady and cold, amplified by the microphone. "The structure has failed." Jax raised his hands slowly, the gun clattering to the floor. Monica collapsed. She didn't faint. She just sank to her knees, sobbing, not for Lucas, not for her crimes, but for herself. She looked at the crowd, pleading with her eyes, but all she saw was disgust. I looked down at the papers on the table. The transfer of power. The surrender of my dignity. I picked up the heavy gold fountain pen. I looked at Monica kneeling on the floor. I uncapped the pen, and with a deliberate, calm motion, I drew a thick, black X across the entire page. Then I dropped the pen. It rolled off the table and clicked against the floor. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs of the stage not as a frail old man, but as a father who had kept his promise. The flashing lights of the police cameras blinded me for a moment, but I kept walking. I walked through the chaos, through the noise, through the ruins of their greed. I walked toward the exit where the rain had finally stopped, and the clean gray light of Seattle was waiting for me. The chaos that followed was deafening. The SWAT team did not just enter the room, they flooded it like a tidal wave of black tactical gear and shouting voices. The air was filled with commands to get down, to show hands, to surrender. The guests, the reporters, the board members, they were all scrambling for cover, diving beneath the tables that were draped in expensive linen. Jax did not surrender. He was a cornered animal, and in that moment his survival instinct overrode his logic. He saw the officers closing in, he saw the exits blocked, and he made a fatal calculation. His hand, which had been raised halfway, dropped suddenly, diving into the inside of his jacket. He was not reaching for a surrender. He was reaching for the 9mm pistol he had concealed. I was standing closest to him. To him, I was just an obstacle, a frail old man leaning on a wooden stick. But the cane Sterling had given me that morning was not a prop. It was solid hickory weighted with lead in the handle. A tool for stability, yes, but in the hands of a structural engineer who understands leverage, it was a weapon. As Jax's fingers closed around the grip of his gun, I did not think. I did not hesitate. I swung. I put every ounce of my 72 years of rage, every ounce of the grief I felt for my son, into that motion. The heavy handle of the cane cut through the air with a low whistle. It connected with Jax's wrist just as the gun cleared his holster. The sound was sickening. A sharp, wet crack of bone shattering under impact. Jax howled, a sound of pure shock and agony. The gun flew from his useless hand, spinning through the air before skittering across the stage and falling into the orchestra pit. He doubled over, clutching his broken arm, his face turning gray with pain. Before he could recover, 3 officers were on him. They tackled him to the hardwood floor with the force of a collapsing wall. I watched as they tied his hands behind his back, pressing his face into the very stage where he had planned to celebrate his victory. Then I turned to Monica. She was not running. She was frozen, standing amidst the ruins of her scheme. Her face was a mask of disbelief. 2 officers grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of justice closing its jaws. As they dragged her past me, she began to scream. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of entitlement. "You crazy old man!" she shrieked, thrashing against the officer's grip. "You think you have won. You have lost everything too, Harrison. You are alone. You have no one. You are going to die in that empty house just like Lucas died." The officers paused, trying to get a better grip on her. I stepped forward. I raised a hand, signaling them to wait for just a second. They looked at me, and perhaps seeing the resolve in my eyes, they paused. I leaned in close. I wanted her to hear me. I wanted her to remember this voice every night she spent in her cell. I looked deep into her eyes, which were wide with hate and panic. "I lost my son, Monica." I whispered, my voice low and steady, like the grinding of tectonic plates. "And that is a pain that will never heal. But I did not lose my conscience. I did not sell my soul for a bank account." I straightened up, looking down at her. "You, however," I said softly. "You lost your freedom. You lost your name. And you lost the game you thought you were playing alone. Goodbye, Monica." I nodded to the officers. They hauled her away, her heels dragging on the floor, her screams fading as they pushed her through the exit doors and into the back of a waiting squad car. I stood there on the stage alone again. The room was buzzing with the aftermath. Reporters were shouting questions at me. Flashes were going off, blinding me. Sterling was making his way toward me, a grim smile on his face. But I did not speak to the press. I did not wave to the crowd. I simply picked up my cane, feeling the weight of it in my hand. I adjusted my tie, the blue tie with the sailboats that Lucas had given me, and I walked away. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and into the cool gray afternoon of Seattle. The weeks following the arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings that tested my endurance as much as the night of the confrontation. The media descended upon the story like vultures hungry for the details of the Black Widow of Seattle. I refused every interview. I wasn't doing this for fame. I was doing it to cleanse my son's name. I sat in the front row during the sentencing hearing, Sterling by my side. Monica tried to catch my eye, perhaps to beg, perhaps to manipulate one last time. She looked small in her prison uniform, stripped of her designer clothes and her arrogance. I didn't look away. I watched as the judge read the verdict, ensuring that every year she stole from Lucas was paid back in decades of confinement. When the gavel finally banged, sealing their fate, I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, quiet release, like a steel cable finally snapping under tension. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. The rain had stopped, and the grass was a vibrant green. I placed the hard drive, the digital witness to his suffering, on the earth above him. "It's done, son," I whispered to the wind. The bridge held. We carried the load. For the first time since his death, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. 1 year later, the rain was falling softly against the large glass windows of the recreation room, but inside it was warm and bright. The room was filled with the sound of laughter, the clattering of plastic bricks, and the focused silence of creation. I stood near the back of the room watching. Above the main entrance, a bronze plaque caught the light. The Lucas Caldwell Center for Youth. It wasn't a stiff corporate foundation. It was a place for kids who had fallen through the cracks. Kids who had lost their parents, kids who had been tossed around the foster system, kids who needed to know that they were not just debris but building blocks. I walked over to a table where a young boy sat alone. He was about 10 years old, with messy hair and eyes that held too much shadow for his age. His name was Leo. Not my grandson, but in a way he was part of the family I had chosen to build. He was struggling with a model bridge. He was trying to connect the span to the support pillars, but every time he let go, the structure sagged and collapsed. He looked frustrated, ready to sweep the whole thing onto the floor. "It keeps breaking," he muttered, kicking the table leg. "It is stupid." I pulled up a chair and sat down beside him. My knees still creaked, but I didn't mind. "It is not stupid, Leo," I said gently. "It is just unbalanced. Look here." I pointed to the center of his model. "You have too much weight in the middle and not enough support on the edges," I explained. "Gravity is always pulling down. You have to give it a path to travel. You have to shim back." I picked up a few extra pieces, snapping them into place, creating a triangular truss along the side of the bridge. "Triangles," I told him. "They are the strongest shape. They take the pressure and they spread it out, so no single piece has to carry the load alone." Leo watched me, his eyes narrowing in concentration. He reached out and touched the new support. He pressed down on the bridge. This time it held. It stood firm. "It works," he whispered, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It works because we reinforced it," I said. "That is how bridges work. And that is how people work too, Leo. When the weight gets too heavy, you do not just stand there and break. You build supports. You find people to help you carry the load. You build triangles." He looked up at me. "Like you?" he asked. I felt a lump in my throat. I reached out and ruffled his hair. "Yeah, kid," I said. "Like me." I looked around the room. I saw Sterling in the corner talking to the center's director. I saw the other volunteers helping children read and draw. I saw a community built from the wreckage of my grief. I wasn't the lonely old man in the empty house anymore. I wasn't the victim of a greedy daughter-in-law. I was Harrison Caldwell, engineer, builder, father. I smiled. It wasn't a polite smile for the cameras, or a brave smile for the mirror. It was a real smile. It started in my chest and warmed me all the way to my fingertips. I had lost the person I loved most in the world. But in fighting for him, I had found a reason to keep living. I had built a new bridge over the chasm of my sorrow, and this one was built to last. This story taught me a lesson that took 72 years to truly understand. We often think that family is the safest place in the world. We think that blood guarantees loyalty, and that love is a shield that nothing can penetrate. But sometimes the people closest to us are the ones holding the knife. Blind trust is not a virtue, it is a vulnerability. Real love is not about blind faith, it is about respect and integrity. And when those things are broken, you have every right to protect yourself. You have every right to tear down the toxicity and build something new on a foundation of truth. You are not defined by the people who betray you. You are defined by how you rebuild after they are gone. If this story touched your heart, or if you have ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are strong enough to stand up for themselves. And tell me in the comments below, what is the one thing that helped you get through your toughest time? I read every single comment. Until next time, keep building with love and respect.